predominantly goes into our single site Pinot. As part of one of our management tools, we use a T-bug, which is a soil moisture sensor, and sort of draw on those quite extensively through the irrigation season. It acts as a bit of backup to some of the other loggers that we've got in the vineyard, and I've been running these for about 6 or 7 years now, and so it just gives me cross-referencing with some of the other things. So if I know see any variations in any of the data that's coming through, you usually sort of pick it up pretty quickly, because you see how things are plotting and tracking with certainly with moisture content. I've recently had these serviced. They hadn't been serviced for about 4 years, so again, I really started to notice some weird figures coming through on my graphing, and I thought, no, we've got to get those checked out. So being in the soil for that period of time, you get a lot of corrosion and breakdown of the finer wiring, and yeah, the sensitive sort of probes that are in there doing their measurements. As part of our sustainable program, we've just recently dosed on some compost, which is going out at 25 cubic metres to the hectare. We're working slightly heavier rate here at Richmond than we are at the other vineyard, because the balance and sort of status of growth is pretty good at Campania. So sort of 2 properties, 2 different sort of management strategies based on soil and growth performances. So yeah, any questions?
Where are you getting your compost from? And what is it?
It's waste material from Boyer, the paper material. There's also poppy waste, and some there's also fish waste in there as well. So it's sort of a little bit finer than normally than what we've sort of seen in the past. It's almost like a dirt itself. So yeah, so it's quite granulated. It's still very light and friable. Take a pinch. Get nutrient analysis of that when we go to buy it, so I know what sort of level of nutrient we're putting on in the vineyard. So again, that's one of our other methods of monitoring and working with the performance of the vines, is we take pretty extensive nutrient analysis through the growing period, and we benchmark that with other growers in the region. So we look at what we're pulling off based on fruit, on our pruning weights. We look at certain stages of the vine growth need certain adjustments to its nutrient requirements. So that for us is a very important thing. We've been involved with this benchmarking for around about 5 years now, and we did get involved further back, but I just didn't see the benefit back then, back in the early 2000s. So we've been able to be more active and more focused, and that benchmarking we then get together as a group of growers, and we'll go and visit each vineyard and just talk about issues that we might have had, and yeah, looked at figures and sort of worked on that. Some people have different philosophies with timing of certain elements and nutrients, but again, we all have our own plan. That's then costed out. So we start at the beginning of the year, do winter time now, do soil samples, work out what we've got as a base, nutrient levels, and then we'll go and look at what we're targeting for a fruit quality or fruit volume point of view, and then we set up our program accordingly. So nitrogen's being applied at regular intervals through the growing season. There's boron, there's iron, there's copper, of which again all phosphorus and potassium all sort of spread out through the growing period. So, and that lays the benchmark for our nutritional program, which certainly this year we've been really happy with the growth of the vines. The yields have been good. We actually had to did quite extensive yield monitoring this year, where we go through and count the bunches and then estimate a bunch weight and then spread that out across the whole block, and then we say, well, no, that's over our targeted weight, we want to pull back some of that fruit. We then go through and work out, well, okay, we're running at 16 bunches per vine, let's pull it back to 12 bunches of vine, and we'd sort of look at rolling that out in certain clones of Pinot, and just to really find that sweet spot for fruit quality. This time of year, as I said, we've been through and we've done our pruning weights, where we'll prune the whole vine back, work out what we want to lay down, take all the pruning that we don't need, and we'll actually weigh that and record that. Prior to that, we'll actually count the number of shoots that we leave behind, or that have been left behind, and we'll also count the number of buds that were laid down, just so that we can get find out how many shoots that have shot, and we then know with roughly the average bunches per vine, we know how fertile they've been, and then so we can lay that over the top of our fertiliser program and our irrigation program to see how smoothly that sort of run. Whether we've got any holes in there we need to fill or adjust accordingly.
So Matt, how many samples when you're doing that that pruning weight?
Yeah, well, behind you you'll see there's 16 rows, and out of those 16 rows we've taken 20 samples. So in this 1 hectare block we would have taken 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, about 50 to 60 samples.
Yep.
From a hectare, which is about 3,500 vines.
So is there?
That's in one hit, and then how many times did we do that over the growing?
Well, that's just the pruning weights.
Okay.
Yep.
But then what Tim's getting to was the bunch counting during the growing season. Yep. We did that 3 times. So, yep. And we'd go through and do each block. We'd probably do again 10. Yep. Well, each clone we'd do sort of around about 10 counts.
And is that sampling rate, has that been worked out among your benchmarking group, or what's that based on? No, it's just something that's feasible for us to do with the number of people we've got. Okay.
When you're dealing with numbers and stats and standard variations and all of that sort of thing, we just, that little bit goes out the door. We just work on an average then. So,
okay.
Yeah. So not that scientific, but it is sort of scientific to some degree.
Pragmatic as well. I mean, you've got to be able to do what you can do.
Practically, that's right. Yeah.
But so have you worked out your error margins in that, so that you know how confident you are? We've got to ask these questions because it's data and analysis.
It is. No, we haven't gone to that degree, and I guess I've seen some pretty extensive yield spreadsheets come out of Merbein from some of the guys in South Australia, and they are just mind-blowing on how extensive they are, and you just get lost in the first little bit. So we sat down, Tim and I, and we sort of worked out, well, what do we want to do, where do we want to go, and how can we achieve that?
How confident do you really need to be anyway?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've probably got one staff that might have trouble counting, so I take his numbers. I usually know where they recorded in the, and we might just sort of, okay, he might have been a bit down or a bit up, or he counted. Because on a vine you'll find you'll have a big primary bunch come out of here, and then you might have a smaller bunch, and whether he's counted that as 1, 2 or 1.5. So you sort of get that sort of variation. He might have called it a half, I would have called it another bunch. So you got all that sort of stuff.
Do you write that on a checklist in paper form, or how do you actually enter that data?
Yeah, that's all paper form. Yeah, and then we do enter it in the field. I'd love to get it onto a tablet and we can just put it in on a tablet, but Tim and I sit down and we'll say, well, you know, numbers are, yeah, you've made some improvements, you pulled some weight out of that or some numbers out of that.
We put all this on to Google Docs, and then the winemaking team can share that. So we can record. I mean, we had 4 different dates that we, from the initial point of, right, this is where we're at. Then we thinned, came back and counted again, did that 3 times until we got to the end. And we were only 11% out over 12 hectares at the end for total yield. So it's pretty close.
No, it's not, you know, we sort of thought, well, with all the errors along the line, pretty happy with that. So.
But it gives you enough to make good decisions based on it.
Yeah, that's right.
We would have been in real trouble if we
hadn't have done it. The black stuff would have been on the wall. It really would. There's certain clones in this block here. If we had had a hectare of that, there would have been 12 tonnes to the hectare, and the canopy wasn't there to carry 12 tonnes. And luckily we did get in and make those adjustments early on, and it came in at just over 7. And then other blocks we didn't yield adjust because it was sort of on the money or slightly below, so that sort of carried with some that was lower. So you sort of had a natural, but we did try to keep a close eye on it.
With your drip system, do you fertigate through that as well?
Yes, yep. Yeah, we do. That's part of our program that we sit down at the beginning of the year, or this time of year. I call this the beginning of the year because this is when we now lay down next year's crop, and we look at, you know, a lot of the things with growth, and I put my pruning weights in there. We look at our yield, and again look at any nutrient deficiencies. What we take out of the vineyard, we like to put back into the vineyard. So with the fruit that comes off, we get that tested, and we get that calculated out on so many kilos per hectare of NP or K, and we then come back once we've done our soil analysis. That's looked at, and then we adjust what we've taken off in crop and what's available in the soil, and we put that back on again, either through the season, or we'll do a heavy hit of something that may be required, like lime, that sort of thing.
And with your off-carpet trimmings, do you put those back into the mulch too? Or?
Yes, yep. Yeah, they just get thrown into the interrow here, and we've got a mulcher that goes along behind the tractor and just smashes them up. You know, from this time last year, you're looking at little bits like that, and they are getting more brittle and breaking down, and again they're feeding the interrow area. So it's another thing really passionate about is the microbial activity and the health of the soil from that area, because once you've got a healthy soil, you'll get a healthy vine, you'll get good quality fruit. The vine builds its own resistance to disease, and you can back off on your chemistry that we apply, so we can look at softer chemicals.
Do the pressings, the skins go in too, or what do you do with those?
From our 70 tonnes of fruit that we produce, we've got a couple of heaps up the top here of mark, so all the skins and stalks and pips, and we've got 2 years worth of product up there at present. We like to sort of really let that naturally break down and leach out. It's usually quite high in acids, natural acids, of which, you know, over a 2 or 3 year period that's depleted quite extensively. We don't want to make our soils more acidic.
No.
Tassie soils tend to be acidic enough as it is.
Thank you.
So hopefully in the next couple of years, we won't put compost on probably for another 2 years, but we'll mix that in with the compost that we'll put out, and it'll go out at that time.
A question here, Taylor.
Yep.
You were talking about your tea bug.
Yep.
Is there a certain program that goes back to? Do you have like a main program that you use?
Yep.
Or...
Yep. No, we have I've got just a field logger, so it's a little box.
Yep.
Actually, to download the information, I just come up, just tap the box, and it automatically downloads it onto my little logger.
Yep.
I then take it back, and it's plugged into the computer, and the MEA people that we got it from have their own program.
Mm-hmm.
Plug that in, and it's just automatically updated on the graph, and then clears the logger ready for the next download. So quite simple to use.
Yep.
You don't need to be a whiz with anything like that. It's good. It's really all that we could afford when we rolled this sort of thing out.
Yep.
So and the cost of these things have come down considerably now, and the quality and a lot of the technology have gone off in other areas, and they're now becoming more affordable too. So. We've got another simpler form which is just based on gypsum blocks. We'll see one over further when we go over a bit further, but it just was just set at 2 different depths and just has a visual. It's called a G-dot, and it just shows little dots at certain pressure levels based on the gypsum block below the surface. So that's good for staff. They'll be wandering around. I always sort of throw a bit of responsibility back onto those guys, just in case I haven't been able to download some stuff for a little while. And I might say to them, "No, just check out the G-dot in the Chardonnay at Richmond when you go past next time, and just let us know." So. So they have some input onto how things are performing too, which I think is really important, rather than just doing the jobs. Try to throw a little bit more responsibility their way.
Yep.
And that gets them interested, and then, some people stand up and say, well, okay, I might have said just keep an eye on, we're running the Grigio block overnight. Just make sure, if you're walking past it, walk along the ends, just check that every row's fired. We haven't had a grommet blow out at one end, so again it's just that onus back onto the guys that they're having input.
Yeah. And going back to your irrigation.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Is it an automatic setup, or as in, do you guys have to manually do it, or you automatically set a time on a computer?
No, this has been, for me, it's been fantastic because it was all manual. You can see the first filter system here. It was turn the valve on, and then I'll come back in 2 hours time. After 2 hours time I got an appointment, or got held up somewhere else. It's gone for 4 hours. Shit, too much, So we've automated it. I've got a program on the computer that has the days. I have contact with all of the solenoids, so we've wired all the solenoids up, and that's gathered in the pump shed here, which I'm getting data. You can see just up on the hill here between the 2 pine trees, that shiny pole with a shiny. Yeah, that's a little solar panel that runs radio signals from soil and the solenoid valve. So there's 8 valves being controlled by that little controller up there. Sends it down here to the pump shed. The pump shed then relays it back to the office. On the end of the office here we have a radio receiver that I can transfer the data to and fro. So I can plot the moisture levels in the soil from the office. I can actually do it from my phone. I can turn blocks on and turn blocks off. So it gives that real versatility.
So if it's going to bucket down in 2 days' time, and your system's saying I need water,
yep,
can you manage for that?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I really, this is one of these future forecasting, decision-making situations that farmers get put in. We might have just had middle of summer. We might have just had 26, 27, 30 degree day. And we're forecasting a thunderstorm and 90% chance of 10 mils plus. I'd probably treat that as maybe a 5 mil event, just knowing from local areas that might have been forecasted for Hobart, and Hobart might get that because it's closer to the mountain. Out here we're in a bit of a rain shadow, so in saying that, I use a lot of my knowledge and experience to just say, no, look, I'm not too fussed about that. We can get on, and I can put a spray on without worrying about too much at that time. So it's a lot of that comes down to sort of not gut feel, but just experience and knowing the conditions around us.
How do you use the yield, and what's your relationship with them in terms of the rainfall?
Yep. We're a trial project for them. They are building a lot of what you can get off at present off the app sites. So we're experimental. They talk to me. They just continually asking questions. They come out to the site. got a couple more sensors further along, and they say, well, when they came here, they said, well, what are your main issues? And I said, well, you know, irrigation for Richmond is one, wind is another, and looking at soil and air temperature and leaf wetness. They're probably the main issues and things that I'd like to monitor. So they rolled out a couple of stations, one here and a little bit more of a sheltered spot, another one further over. And they said, right, they've done all the groundwork to set that up. Now, with the weather side of things, and this is where we're sort of at, they're gathering the data now, they're getting all that data coming in, and spend a bit of time with their app developer, and we put cards on the table, and they say, well, what are your major decision-making processes that you go through? You know, so they had all these different names, different tasks, and you know, so it might have been today's weather, tomorrow's weather, yesterday's weather, weather in 5 days' time, weather in 7 days' time. So looking at windows like that, looking at the past, looking at the future, and just help them roll that sort of process of thinking out so they can put it into a usable form. So I feel like I'm a guinea pig, but as I was saying to Tom earlier, I feel as though I want to give back to the industry, and it's part of the building blocks to make something better. So I'm just down here at the bottom. Someone further up the chain will be in a much better position to benefit from the work that these guys are doing here on the vineyard. So, and I've always had that philosophy that, you know, young minds really keen to find out stuff. Uni students, ag science students have run trials and some of their PhDs in the vineyard here and also at Campania too. So that's been really important from my point of view, to be able to allow these people to have places to do their research.